I started carrying a handgun when I was 19. There's a sportsman's carry firearm permit that you can obtain. It gives you the opportunity to carry a handgun at a younger age when you're training a dog for hunting, when you're fishing, trapping, or hunting.
I'm interested in firearms because I've always been around them from an early age. I think I started out at the age of 2 or 3, my father taking me into the woods, and he would go hunting and take me along on some of his trips. So I've been around them as long as I can remember. I'm a believer if somebody's old enough to vote, if somebody's old enough to be in the military and serve their country, they should probably also be old enough to carry concealed legally.
I've been interested in guns and firearms in general since I bought M1 Garand from the United States government back in 2003, and I've always been fascinated by firearms and just sort of the nature of conflict in general. I've been concealed carrying for about 5 years now, and 21 seems to be a good age. I think if you have a need to carry under 21, maybe there's some other things you should adjust in your life.
I came in contact with firearms in 1990 when I started working in the criminal justice system. I started working in contract security and also in private investigations. I believe that the presence of guns, or the unknown presence of whether or not somebody has a firearm, may be a very deciding factor for some, particularly some motivated offenders. It may be that point where they will stop just short of committing the crime because they're unsure whether or not they're going to be met with some type of armed resistance.
Well, as a police officer, of course, I carry a gun about every day of my life. In addition to that, I've been our supervisory firearms instructor for probably 12 years now. You might say people with guns pick a place where there's no one with guns because no one's going to shoot back at them. I mean, very rarely do you see these things happening in police stations.
If Penn State were to allow concealed carry, obviously those individuals who may already be carrying concealed would now be perhaps more relaxed because they would know they're not actually quietly violating an important university policy.
I don't think there should be separate rules by a magic dividing line as to what is campus and what is not. There's issues where you have buildings that are downtown in State College that are now all of a sudden part of Penn State, which most people aren't even aware of. Like, well, wait a minute, now I may be violating some policy. I didn't even realize this was official Penn State property.
So many 100,000 concealed carry permit holders killed no one yesterday. And that was an interesting quote, that there was, for instance, they're saying out of all the hundreds of thousands of handguns that are being carried legally by qualified citizens in the United States, that the amount of involvement in crime is extremely low.
They have some police, but I can tell you that there's not a police officer in every building. There's not a police officer in every floor. There's not one in every classroom, and it's impractical to do that. The only practical way to ensure the best security for the student body population is to allow concealed carry permits.
I think it's something that shouldn't be taken away from somebody. I just think it's a right and a responsibility, and that there's too often it's fear based on emotions, not on facts, that make people make decisions like this, to say, okay, you have to have this certain rule preventing concealed carry on campus.
If people are going to do something stupid, they're going to do something stupid regardless of the tool they use to do it. There would be a lot more stabbings if there were no guns. The hammer would probably become a much more dangerous tool. Apart from that, no, I don't think the crime rate would go down appreciably. People would still be robbing liquor stores with pitchforks.
Places like England and Australia, which have very severe gun restrictions, and they've actually gone through gun buybacks and registration and to some extent confiscation, actually they've seen an increase in gun crime, which is counterintuitive. You say, oh, well, nobody's allowed to have guns. Well, guess what? The criminals aren't allowed to have guns, and they don't pay attention to the laws anyway.
Yeah, I do think guns get a bad reputation as sort of just solely the instruments of crime and of harm to humanity. It's not an instrument of anything. The guns are neither good nor bad. They're simply, they follow the intent of the user.
I had a president of a Japanese company that we took shooting locally, and after the fact he said to me, he said, frankly, I was very anxious and I was actually scared to go shooting because all of the images and all the information that I ever had was from our media that said, oh, guns are bad and guns are dangerous. He said, after the fact, he said, that was really, really neat. He said, I appreciate that, how much mental focus and concentration and attitude and precision and how much fun it can be. And he said, they're really not bad at all.
It allows law-abiding citizens the opportunity to defend themselves if the need arises. Other than that, no one will know they're there.
NRA member, for instance, that would be a tip. Don't go and commit an armed robbery of a guy walking down the street with a "I love the NRA" hat on. You might be up against something there, but that's not the purpose of concealed carry. Concealed carry is the right to protect yourself in a discreet manner, so that you're not causing alarm to other people, and that you have that firearm as a use of force option for your own protection.
You know, for people considering concealed carry, is to first off get training, second off understand the laws in Pennsylvania, because they are different. Even though Pennsylvania is a gun-friendly commonwealth, the laws across the nation are not uniform, and people should be aware of the laws that they live under.
If a person would conceal carry, they should achieve as much training as possible, and that training should be in how to use the firearm, but also in how to understand the escalation of force.
You look at a lot of these kind of mass shooting sort of issues, and you say, well, what if, you know, the police didn't get there until, you know, however many minutes afterwards? What if someone there had been equipped to defend themselves and the other people?
You can always do stuff illegally. He chose to carry a gun illegally on campus, locked the doors, and started shooting people. And it was sad that there were police there, but they didn't save those 31 people from dying. Now, in the event that they allowed concealed carry, you know, you can't save everybody, but what if the person in the next room had a handgun, they heard shooting, and they came to see that this guy is shooting people? You know, maybe only 5 people would have died, maybe only 6 people, which is still an unacceptable number, but it's a whole lot less than 31.
Both the Virginia Tech offender and the Arizona shooting of the federal judge, both those offenders were placed into the category of mentally disordered offenders. It's also a known fact that basically the only thing that will really stop an active shooter is another active shooter.
I know a pastor that concealed carries because of threats against the church in his own life. I know a worship leader that carries. I know a youth pastor that used to carry now who has resigned, and a construction manager, and a family business owner, and as a father, they carry.
My grandfather actually had to brandish a firearm to protect somebody. Did not actually have to use it, but it was a serious deterrent of somebody that was trying to assault somebody else with a butcher knife. And the fact that my grandfather had it, it was a shotgun, but it wasn't a concealed carry, prevented them from carrying out that attack.
The most frightening sound in the world is a shotgun being racked, you know, because they throw that in, so there's such a psychological response to it. But yeah, the very act of brandishing a weapon, if you're in a situation where it calls for that, would probably, I mean, I know that would be enough to scare me off.
Give a warning, drop the gun, freeze, person resists, open fire. You're not shooting to kill you, you're shooting to stop the force being used against you.
You have a responsibility for your own safety. You can't blame that on the police. You can't blame that on the criminals. You have the responsibility to defend yourself.
You should not use force because you can. You should use force because you must.
In the event that the 1 in a million times that the actual concealed carry permit has to go to jail, I personally would rather go to jail than knowing that I could have stopped 20 people from getting murdered.
My name's Seth Robinson. I believe in the freedom of law-abiding citizens to be able to defend themselves. And I believe in the Second Amendment to the United States Constitution.
I guess the only thing that I would say is just that I'm Don McCandless. I'm a firm believer in Second Amendment rights, whether you happen to be on campus or not.
My name is Bill Morsbacher, and I'm a captain with the Penn State University Police.
My name is Brian Baker. I'm a professional security consultant. I'm a licensed private detective in Pennsylvania. I'm also a part-time criminology lecturer at Penn State University. My views reflect my professional opinions, don't reflect the actual policies and attitudes of my department or the Penn State University.
Once again, I'm Zeph Thal. I believe in the right to defend yourself. I believe in the Second Amendment. I'm an NRA member as well as a concealed carry permit holder, and I believe it's every citizen's responsibility to learn how to defend themselves in a dynamic critical incident. And I think you should look into getting a concealed carry permit, a handgun, learning how to use it, and really becoming a responsible citizen.